Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It's a historic day for Celtic Football Club, a historic day for justice, because justice has been served. Brendan Rodgers has found out the verdict of his SFA hearing, and the lawyers, that Lionel Messi of sports law, has worked wonders for Celtic and Brendan Rodgers. It's time to talk about the disciplinary hearing. It's time to hear about the results of said hearing. God, it feels like an episode of Better Call Saul. I love it. Hello, if you haven't already, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. We've got a hat on today. Why not? Pretty much because I couldn't be bothered drying my hair properly and it looks a state. But here we are. It's time to do another video. So, as I've said, go down below, hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated as Celtic are so close to their return this weekend. But we've got big news about Brendan Rodgers today, and it's time to discuss that. Here are the headlines over the past half an hour. Brendan Rodgers free for Celtic's trip to Rangers as the Celtic manager's fate has been decided after his SFA charge over officials rant. Here's the headline, or sorry, the article itself. Celtic boss Brendan Rodgers is free to take his place in the Ibrox dugout next month after he was handed a one-game ban with another suspended following his furious rant after defeat to Hearts. The Irishman faced the Hampden Chiefs after being hauled before the breaks for his comments regarding officials following the champions 2-0 defeat to Tynecastle at the start of the month, and was facing a two-game ban, which would have left him in the stands for the big derby game on April 7th. But one game has been suspended, meaning he won't be in the dugout for Sunday's clash against Livingston, but he will return for that game at Ibrox on April 7th. Now, Brendan Rodgers has got a lovely track record at Ibrox, I must say. Some historic photos of some historic wins, him on that touchline, so it's nice to see him back for that game. I'm not going to change my tune and say it was something I was overly concerned about in the first place. However, it is much welcomed news, something I'm very, very happy about. And as I said in the intro to the video, justice has been served. So, he will spend Sunday against Livingston in the stands. John Kennedy will be in charge from the touchline in that away trip to a very difficult Tony Macaroni, as we all know. We got on pretty well there earlier on in the season, but Brendan Rodgers will only be in the stands for that. I must say, being in the stands at Livingston, he's not too far away. If you can think of the main stand at Livingston where the dugouts are, I'm pretty sure he'll be able to get his point across should he decide to shout a few instructions to John Kennedy. I'm pretty sure he'll be okay. But the big story is he'll be back for that game against Rangers at Ibrox, which I'm honestly surprised about, pleasantly surprised. I did think, and I had this feeling deep inside me, that the SFA would have upheld their decision to ban him for 2 games, but obviously Celtic have presented their case pretty well. And when it comes to these sort of hearings and when it comes to these situations, you think that typically the authorities in charge, being the SFA in this situation, would consider Brendan Rodgers' past, would consider previous offences. And Brendan Rodgers isn't one to fall to these offences very often. It's very rare we see Brendan Rodgers in a situation where he's looking at touchline bans. And I'd imagine that his good behaviour from his 2 stints in the Scottish Premier League, or Scottish Premiership, sorry, has probably done him a few favours in trying to bring this down to a 1-game ban. Also, got to thank the lawyers that were helping, Saul Goodman and such. No, I'm joking, but we heard yesterday that Celtic were appointing DeMarco, a very, very high up, top man when it comes to sports law and football law. We heard that they were appointing him for this case, and obviously it's an appointment that has paid off. They've managed to get Brendan Rodgers back onto the touchline for that game against Rangers. So, a good result for Celtic, a great result for Brendan Rodgers himself, and now it's time to put the heads down and focus on Sunday and then look forward to that game against Rangers once that's done. But it's a game at a time, isn't it? It's all very well and good knowing that Brendan Rodgers will be there against Rangers next week. But at the same time, you've got to really just put your eyes down and focus now, because it's all meaningless if we go and drop points against Livingston this weekend. You know, we're celebrating now that Rodgers is going to be there at Ibrox, but to what effect will it be if we don't get the 3 points against Livingston this weekend. So it's time to put all of this behind us. It's time to really just knuckle down and make sure that we don't leave Livingston with anything less than 3 points, because that would be a disaster. And then if we did leave Livingston with anything less than 3 points, I think a few people would probably want Brendan Rodgers to be gone from Ibrox the following week. I'm delighted he's there. He's my guy. He's my man. It's good news for us. It's going to be interesting now from here till the end of the season to see how things are dealt with when it comes to refereeing and the kind of open criticism of refereeing, because we're in such a tense title battle now from here till the end of the season. I think that referees are going to be under so much scrutiny, rightfully so, because decisions have to be bang on now. You know, a split decision, a decision that can change a game could cost someone a league title. And I think that Brendan Rodgers was perfectly reasonable in his comments following Tynecastle. You might say that that's just me being biased to the man who manages my football club, but he called out the refereeing for what it was. He called out the VAR decisions for what it was. And now I think you're going to have to see both Brendan Rodgers and Philippe Clement of Rangers have to dance around these kind of decisions, if they're bad or poor, and what they're saying, so they're not banned for this run-in of games, so they don't find themselves sitting in the stands again. Brendan Rodgers doesn't want a repeat of that, but it's going to be hard. I couldn't even imagine the pressure that would be under the referees or the managers when speaking about these referees if decisions go wrong. So it's going to be a fun few weeks. But a 1-game ban for our Brendan. He will be back for Ibrox. Great news. Happy days. Long live the Brodge. Brodge 1, SFA 0. That's pretty much the big story of today. We've been kind of waiting for that story all week. We've been waiting to see the verdict of this hearing, and now that it's happened, it's a lot, it's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? Like, that's it, 1-game ban. There's not much of a fallout from it all. I think that the fallout and the conversation would have been much more severe or much more in-depth should it have been a ban that lasted longer than 2 games, or if he was going to miss the derby. But the relief is that he's going to be there for that game. So it's really kind of a non-story at this point. I don't think that the impact of him not being in the touchline in Livingston is going to be too heavy on Celtic. I don't think it's a disaster by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, it's kind of a underwhelming one, but it's great news. What else is there to talk about? A couple of wee things. Let's go through it. Right then, so the Player of the Year awards are in the hydro this year, as we know. It could be an absolute disaster if we don't win this league title, but anyway, they're there, it's scheduled, the place is booked, and people have started buying their tickets. Today, Celtic have released the shortlists for the Player of the Year awards. This was the article that went up on Celtic.com earlier this morning. They said, with the Celts setting their sights on both the Premiership title and the Scottish Cup between now and the end of the season, the 2024 Player of the Year ceremony, sponsored by Carl Robert and incorporating the 20th staging event with a legendary Player of the Year award, promises to be the best yet. Here is the list of all awards that will be up for grabs on the night. Men's Player of the Year, Men's Goal of the Season, Women's Player of the Year, Women's Goal of the Season, Young Player of the Year, Legendary Player of the Year, Legendary Goal of the Season, 2 new ones, and then some other awards: Men's Players Player of the Year, Women's Players Player of the Year, Top Goal Scorer, Academy Player of the Year, and the Special Recognition Award. So, as Celtic outlined in the article itself, it's the 20th edition of our big Player of the Year ceremony. And they've decided to make it a wee bit special. You would have seen in the list of awards there this year, we've got a Legendary Player of the Year and a Legendary Goal of the Season, which is a bit baffling. I mean, I don't know how it's exactly going to... What is the merit of how you vote for these people? Is it just pick your favourite and see what happens? It looks as though they are picking players that have won awards in the past 20 years for the club since the inaugural Player of the Year ceremony event. But let's have a look through some of the nominees and see what could potentially be the winner and evaluate who should be winner. God, it's quite exciting, but it's quite bizarre at the same time. So here's the Legendary Player of the Year category, which is sponsored by Cameron Commercials. Don't know why I've gave them a shout out. I'm not getting paid for that. Here it is, the option. So we've got Bobo Baldi, Neil Lennon, Stan Petrov, Sean Maloney, Shinsuke Nakamura, Aidan McGeady, Scott Brown, Robbie Keane, Emilio Izagiri, Charlie Mulgrew, Georges Samaras, Chris Commons, Stefan Johansson, Lee Griffiths, Scott Sinclair, Callum McGregor, Odson Edouard, David Turnbull, and Kyogo Furuhashi. There is your options for the Legendary Player of the Year. There is a supporting video which you can go and look at for yourself. But aye, very interesting. Some controversial names in there. Neil Lennon, of course, who has a bit of a split opinion amongst Celtic fans nowadays. Lee Griffiths. Aye, David Turnbull being one of Celtic's legendary players over the last 20 years, I think is a bit of a stretch. I think there's a couple of players in there that I mean, Stefan Johansson, for example, I wouldn't call him legendary. A couple of players that I'm very, very surprised at making the list. But I think that the whole point is, I think it's everybody who's won the award over the 20 years. So if you remember, Kyogo won it last year, David Turnbull won it in the COVID season, Edouard the season prior, McGregor. I think that's the point. I think that's why you've got your Stefan Johanssons. It's every winner since the inaugural event. Henrik Larsson just misses out. He wasn't one of the winners. The 2003 winner is Bobo Baldi. So it does tell you 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, right all the way through to 2023. So I understand now why everybody is there, aka Turnbull and Griffiths and such. But something a bit different. I don't know if they're going to try and get them in attendance. I mean, it would be quality to see Bobo Baldi again. I love him, a hero. But there's also obviously a legendary goal one as well. So it's something to spice it up a bit, I suppose, and try and sell some tickets for the Hydro. As we do every year, we will go through the voting procedure in a separate video because I like to give my opinions on who I think should win each award. So keep an eye out for that in the channel over the next few days. Probably tomorrow we'll go over who I think should be Men's Player of the Year, Goal of the Year, Women's Player of the Year, so on and so forth. We'll cover all of it in a different video, but that was announced today, so you can start your voting now. And that's about it for today. Nothing else really there. Brendan Rodgers has his press conference tomorrow ahead of the game against Livingston, so we'll hear his comments on the ban situation. We'll hear his comments about the game on Sunday with fitness updates, so please make sure to check out the channel tomorrow for all your news and such. But for me today, that's all. God bless Brendan Rodgers. Better Call Saul. What a programme. Happy days. I'll see you all next time.